People like to say folklore died when we learned how things really work, when we modernized civilization, when maps filled in, when engines replaced oars, when we stopped leaving offerings and started leaving our mark on nature. But folklore never claimed to be something to be worked out like a riddle or a maths problem. Folklore never claimed the things in the stories could die. Folklore tales are a warning system. Every culture wrote rules into its land, engraved on the stones and the earth itself. Do not take what is not given. Do not disturb what remembers. Do not answer when something calls your name from the dark. The mistake we made wasn't disbelief. It was assuming the rules stopped applying to us. Scandinavia is known for many things. Beautiful landscapes, beautiful people, and a deep, dark history of ancient tales, enough to rival any other culture. However, these are not ancient stories. These are recent ones. The Troll's Whisper.
Trollets viskning.
Norway. Eric had fished these fjords since he was 16. Long enough to know when the weather lied, when the water changed tone, when the mountains felt closer than they should. He trusted engines, radio signals, depth gauges, things that spoke in numbers instead of superstitions. His grandmother hadn't trusted any of that. She used to point towards the cliffs at dusk and tell him the mountains listened, that trolls weren't creatures so much as corrections. Stone that moved when something living forgot its place. If the rocks know your name, she said, don't answer. Don't even think about it. Eric had smiled through these stories. She'd been born before electricity reached the fjords. Fear was part of the furniture back then. That autumn evening, the fjordsanger idled smoothly through a narrow inlet he normally avoided. The fish finder showed dense readings near the cliff base, too good to ignore. He told himself the warnings were just bad luck dressed up as folklore. The radio crackled once, then went silent. No static, just dead air. The water flattened, not calm, flattened, as if sound itself had been pressed down. Eric cut the engine, listening. The fjord didn't echo anymore. Then he heard his name. Not spoken, carried. Eric. It came from everywhere at once. From the rock face, from beneath the hull, from inside the oarlocks. His first thought was the radio, some feedback loop. He reached for it, fingers shaking. Eric. This time it sounded like his grandmother. He froze. The current shifted without wind, pulling the fjordsanger sideways towards the dark seam in the cliff, a place where the rock dipped inward, like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. Eric rowed hard. The oars bit water, then scraped stone. The cliff moved. Not outward, not suddenly. It unfolded. The troll did not climb from the rock. It separated from it as if it had always been part of the mountain and was simply choosing to stand. Moss tall, stone cracked. A shape resolved that had not been seen by another eye in centuries. It did not roar, it did not speak. It inhaled deeply with a forlorn sigh, then breathed out. The smell was wet stone and old earth and something faintly human, long broken down. One massive hand closed over the side of the boat. Wood split. The hull folded like it had remembered it was once a tree. Eric screamed, once. The fjord swallowed the sound. They found the fjord sanger the next morning, crushed against the rocks where no current should have carried it. No body, no blood trail, just deep grooves in the stone leading into the cliff face. On storm nights, fishermen say the wind still carries a voice through that inlet, not calling for help, just whispering names. And if you hear your own, the old advice still stands. Don't answer. The Draugr's curse.
Draugrens förbannelse.
Iceland. Lena told herself she wasn't reckless. She had permits, equipment, a dissertation committee waiting for results. Iceland was full of burial mounds that had never been properly catalogued. Oral mournings weren't data. The locals didn't argue with her, they just stopped helping. The mound sat alone in a lava field, half sunk, its stones fitted too precisely for erosion to explain. She scanned the entrance before touching it. Symbols cut shallow into the rock. Not decorative, deliberate. She photographed them instead of translating. That was her first mistake. Instead, the air felt compressed, old, not stale, but heavy, like something had been breathing slowly for a very long time. Her headlamp swept across carved walls depicting battles with no clear winners. The figures were distorted, swollen, too large for their armor. The burial chamber was intact. The body sat upright, wrapped in rotted finery, sword laid across his lap. The face was collapsed, but intact enough to suggest expression. Anger preserved better than flesh. Around his neck hung a gold amulet. Lena recorded everything. She didn't speak, didn't acknowledge the dead, didn't leave an offering. She reached out and lifted the amulet. The temperature dropped instantly. Not gradually, instantly. Her breath fogged, her joints stiffened. The body shifted. The Draugr did not stand. It expanded. Flesh tightened. Limbs pressed outward against old wrappings. The chamber creaked, as if the mound itself were resisting the movement. The sound it made was not a growl. It was a wet exhale, like lungs remembering their job. Thief, it said in a voice shaped by burial. Lena ran. She made it out, barely, collapsed into her tent shaking, telling herself it was shock, cold, altitude. The amulet laid beside her recorder, heavy as a stone. She never left Iceland. Her body began to change, not violently, but gradually. Sleep became impossible. Dreams filled with pressure, weight, the sensation of earth resting on her chest. Her limbs felt slow, as if gravity had increased slightly, just for her. By the fourth day, she could barely stand. They found her half buried beside the mound, knees drawn up, fingers clawed into the soil. Her body swollen, rigid, eyes open and unfocused. The amulet was gone. The locals resealed the entrance. They say the mound breathes deeper now, satisfied. The Huldras lure.
Skogsrået lockelse.
Sweden. Oscar walked farther into the forest than he planned to. He did that a lot since his wife died. Let paths fade, let silence stretch. The forest didn't ask questions. The song reached him just before dusk. Not loud, not clear, but familiar in a way that made his chest ache. It threaded through the birch trunks, twisting through his memories rather than his ears. He followed it without realizing he'd changed direction. She waited in a small clearing where the light lingered a little too long. She was beautiful in a way that felt too intentional. Hair catching the sun, skin warm-toned despite the cold. She smiled like someone who already knew him. When she spoke, it touched his ears with a warming familiarity. "You look tired," she said. He believed her. They talked, they laughed. He forgot how long they were standing there. When she took his hand, it felt like relief, like setting something heavy down. When she turned, he saw it. Her back was hollow. Not wounded, not broken, just empty, wood-lined, alive with roots and slow-moving insects. A tail flicked behind her, a cow's tail, thick and unmistakable. He pulled away. Her expression didn't change, but the forest did. Branches bent inward, roots shifted underfoot. The song deepened, pressing into his head until thought became difficult. When he tried to run, the ground grabbed him. Soil closed around his boots, like wet hands. "You stayed too long," she said calmly. They never found Oscar. Years later, hikers disappeared in that forest. Search parties find trees with strange hollows in their trunks, yet warm to the touch. If you stand too close, you can feel something moving inside, slow, rhythmic. And sometimes, just before sunset, a song drifts through the birches. It sounds like someone you miss. We like to believe we live above these stories now. Too modern, too aware. That concrete, steel, signals and search engines put distance between us and what came before. But the land never forgets the rules. The forest still remembers who wanders too far. The mountains still know who takes more than they give. Burial places know when they've been disturbed. Folklore didn't vanish. The warnings still apply. It waits for skeptics, for experts. The old stories were never about monsters. They were about boundaries. And boundaries don't stop existing just because we stop believing in them. So if you find yourself somewhere quiet, somewhere older than the roads around you, and something calls your name from the dark, remember this: the rules still apply.